Hello and welcome to another episode of the Tom and Joe Show. This is our first Patreon special. In our Patreon
Yep.
specials, we are going to talk about stuff that's actually, new. And we,
Yep. Oh, hi.
yeah,
Sorry.
it's alright.
Didn't
And
mean to interrupt.
no, it's alright. And so basically, yeah, we're going to talk about new stuff because, yeah, we do keep up with the times. As I said on the last normal episode, which, if you haven't listened to it, is on our YouTube channel and on obviously on the Patreon as well. Yeah, we will. We don't tend to cover the newer stuff that often, but it will when we do cover it, we will prefer to either leave some time for it to coalesce and digest, or we'll do it in a Patreon episode. In which case, you, our
Hmm.
patrons, will get to listen to it, and you, the people who are listening to this in May, we'll get to listen to it later when there's actually had time to settle on this. Now, obviously, the anime season this season is interesting, and there's some good stuff and there's some rather controversial stuff. But we thought, why not start this with somebody we've already talked about in the shape of Weezer. So today we are talking about the 14th Weezer album released on. Let me just get all the. So this is we are talking about.
Or it's the seventh album if you go by people who actually want albums to be 60 minutes
Yeah.
long.
Yeah. This came out. We're recording this on the
February,
seventh of
the Super
February,
Bowl.
Super Bowl. So yeah, we're off to the Super Bowl after this. But yeah, so basically a week after it's come out. So the critics and Mr. Needle Drop and all those other sort of people have come in and sort of said their piece on it. So yeah, let's talk about sort of generally. Weezer are an American rock band from California. We previously talked about that on our very first music episode, where we talked about their debut album, the Blue Album. Um, Joe, briefly, what are your thoughts on Weezer?
They're fine.
Yeah,
that's that's about as much as I got.
yeah, this is the
When I
guy who
was
actually,
growing up in
yeah.
the 90s, I wasn't even that big into them.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew their big hit Buddy Holly and,
Hmm.
the uh, the sweater song
Yeah. I mean that
and,
you
all
grew
of
up
that.
you
But,
grew up with this stuff. I was like,
yeah.
I was like 3 or 4 when the Blue Album came out. I did not have a musical taste at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
And um, like I said in the Weezer review, they were kind of the aesthetic more than I
Mm,
liked them as music. They were just, it was the sound of the 90s, and it
yeah.
was part of the sound of the mid 90s. And it's just stuff in the background. It wasn't stuff I listened to listen to,
Yeah.
but if it was on the radio, cool.
Mm,
And, then they moved into their Pinkerton, which I know people have
yeah.
reflected and like this is a good album, but it was not for me. The
Mm,
best thing I can say is I, this is not what I want Weezer to do. It's just like I don't want the first song out of a new Weezer album is Rivers Cuomo being tired about how much sex he's getting. That's
yeah.
like okay.
Yeah. And kind of
So
since
it I don't
that we
know.
so Weezer, basically, to briefly explain, to bring things up to sort of date, Weezer, basically from the sort of Pinkerton to about the mid 2000s was very much, we don't want to talk about this album, this is our musical albatross. And then it's sort of like,
Hmm.
and then obviously, the problem is the Weezer then went through a really weird sort of trend following period in the sort of the latter half of the 2000s to the beginning of the 2010s, where you got things like Hurley, which were just, no, this is not like musically, it's the period where they make Beverly Hills,
Yeah, which
which is
it
not a good piece of music like any.
it sounds like a bored Green Day song.
Yeah, yeah. So and then they kind of, and the problem is that sort of, so and then they made in 2014 Everything Will Be Alright in the End, which is very much a re-embracing of that classic sort of first two album sound. and was regarded
Mm-hmm.
by most publications, including even Pitchfork, as a return to form. Um, since then, they've sort of basically wibble wobbled back and forth between, reasonably good stuff. So, for example, the White Album, because Weezer named like every other record after a color, because Weezer just name everything Weezer. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of we're not sort of quite sure what you're doing here, Rivers. Sort of with Rivers Chroma experiments like Pacific Daydream, which is basically I've got on my notes here is basically the interior sound of a Hollister mid the late 2010s. The Teal album, which is just a selection of 80s and 90s covers, basically launched by the fact that somebody on their social media asked them to cover Africa by Toto, which obviously I think is like, okay, fine. The Black
Yeah.
Album, which was, an attempt to do a darker and heavier album, and now we come to this.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I did listen to some stuff on the Teal album because
Mm.
I'm an '80s
Oh
'90s kid,
yeah,
but
it.
it I don't know. It was missing something. Like the
Mm,
Take on Me cover was
yeah.
It's like it's already hard enough to do like a cover of Take on Me
Yeah.
because those vocals are just
Yes.
way above and beyond
Absolutely.
anything most people can do. And Rivers Cuomo cannot do
Yeah,
that.
Rivers Chroma has not got the range to be Magnus Huberdeau from a no. So we arrive at sort of OK Human at sort of a really weird period. So Weezer were originally going to release an album called Van Weezer, which is now coming out in May, and which we will probably also talk about, which is very much the Weezer do a guitar album. Very
Okay.
from the album title, from the fact that it's homaging the late great Eddie Van Halen in its and his band
Mm-hmm.
in its title. And then of course 2020 happened.
Yeah. This is probably the most pandemic album you will ever
Yeah.
have. I mean, this will be like an album for the 2020s if
Oh
there
God,
ever
yeah,
was one.
absolutely. Which is ironic because it started in the production work started in this on 2017, and it was being mostly produced prior to this. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Rivers Cuomo in an interview with the Los Angeles Times says, yeah, by May 2020, so that's not that far into the pandemic. It was like 75% done, and
Mm-hmm.
I think basically Van Weezer has been, moved back, knocked back to sort of May of this year, basically to tie in with the Hella Mega Tour, which is with obviously equal 90s heritage act Green Day and Panic and Fall Out Boy.
Yeah.
Which is like, yeah, I can understand if you have very much got this touring set list that you were trying to do, and the album you've got all the touring set list from, has come out a year earlier. It's like, okay, why are you touring this? So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so that's the background. So we need to sort of talk instantly about why this is just why this is very singular in terms of Weezer's discography, because it may
It doesn't sound like Weezer.
no.
I mean, the lyrics are there,
Mm,
but what it sounds like is not Weezer.
mm,
It we were throwing a bunch of names. What I got is the first two tracks remind me of Jonathan Colton's work on Portal 2.
mm.
Like if you listen to the Turret Opera and then the credit song
Yeah,
to
what you got?
that's what it
Yeah,
sounds like. But and then eventually it also feels like the strings to Eleanor Rigby by the
yeah.
Beatles,
I will.
and
Mm.
and then it leads to uh, the Hey Jude string quartet from the Wes Anderson movie. His second one.
Oh, have a
I
look.
just lost the name.
Not Bottle Rocket. No, that's what is that?
No, oh no, not the third one. I mean,
Oh God.
the one with the family.
Oh,
Yeah,
Royal
but
Royal
they do
Tenenbaums. Yes.
the Royal Tenenbaums.
Yes.
It's my favorite one, and I
Yeah.
lost the name, and I hate my ADHD.
It's
But
fine.
it sounds like the string quartet to Hey Jude, how they like
Hmm.
choose to open the movie, and that sounds like the whole album is kind of like that.
You have described this as the lost Wes Anderson soundtrack album.
Yeah.
It's a very yeah. So what essentially this album is, because I hesitate to even I hesitate to, although it is marketed as a Weezer album, it only has Rivers Cuomo on the album. That's the thing. He's like he is. I don't think he actually plays any instruments on there because I'm looking at the Wikipedia article and everyone is like I think he might play piano on it. I think that's the only thing that he actually is that.
Well, he does have a song in the album literally called
Yeah.
"Playing My Piano,"
Mm,
which is
yeah.
about how he drowns out everything by playing the
Yeah.
piano. So,
But the other three members of Weezer, Patrick Wilson, Brian Bell, and Scott Schreiner, are nowhere to be heard on this album. So it's like, is this
mhm.
just a Rivers Cuomo you know, is this just a Rivers Cuomo solo album which they've just gone, oh screw it, just release it under the Weezer name or not? We can't tell at this point because
Mhm.
But yeah, so the sound of this is basically it's a sort of very lush. It's a very string. I mean, this has got a 38 piece orchestra on it, and which is
Yeah.
like okay, you know,
It's very 70s,
mm,
like we said, like Wes Anderson, that world where it
mm,
lives in modern times, but it's also the 70s.
mm. To the point. I think the album. There were a couple of albums it gets. Obviously, it gets compared unmistakably to Pet Sounds, obviously given Weezer's hugely influenced by other California band, the Beach Boys. But it's also being compared to Nilsson Sings Newman, which is an album by the American singer-songwriter Harry Nilsson, which released in 1970, where he plays songs by the American pianist and composer Randy Newman. And it's like I can hear, I've gone away, I've listened to a little bit of it. It's it's a very difficult record to talk about in terms of because it sounds like a Weezer album. It has the same
Yeah.
you can hear instantly where you would go, oh, here is where we put in a guitar solo, here's where we put in a bass solo, and the songs are structured, albeit slightly shorter than the average Weezer track, like Weezer tracks. That's the thing. It sounds
Hmm.
like a Weezer album, albeit on a string thing. And I'm sort of trying to think of another album that I would compare this to. I mean, obviously you have albums nowadays where they'll put the music of someone like Elvis Presley. I mean, I think they had what was it? The Royal Philharmonic plays that Elvis, and what they did on that, which came out a couple of years ago. And what they had on that was obviously the original backing track, the original track of Elvis singing. But essentially, they had reconstructed the rest of the track and had taken, rock and pop elements into a symphonic structure, which I suppose is the only thing I can immediately compare it to.
Hmm.
But you do get this very, 70s, very lush sound to it. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, but where it sort of does hark back to sort of the classic Weezer thing is in the lyrics, because this is and people keep bringing up this comparison to Pinkerton, inevitably to Pinkerton in terms of the thematic structure.
Hmm. And I listened to Pinkerton before so I could compare it.
Hmm.
I don't really hear it at all. I just what I understand is it's like it sounds different than a regular Weezer
Hmm.
album, so therefore Pinkerton.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is dark. As I said, I think Pinkerton has become the albatross around Weezer's neck for good and well. Everything will either be compared to the Blue Album, or if it's trying something different, it'll be like, oh, it's Pinkerton again, or he's writing songs about from a personal point of view. Oh, it's Pinkerton again, and it's like, yeah. So, I mean, what are your general thoughts on this, Joe? Because it's like, Weezer have never been your favorite band, but it's like.
No, I mean, I don't want to act like I'm down on them.
Mm,
It's just they were never my thing. They were my brother's thing, and he loves Weezer, but I'm just, uh, they're all right. I
yeah,
went more with like different. I went with Oasis garbage. I went with,
yeah,
with more British influence. I mean, I think my big American band was the Foo Fighters,
yeah,
who were like more brash and like they. There's something. Rivers Cuomo definitely went to Harvard
yeah.
because this it is what you it has that you know modern pop
Mm,
you know stuff, but then it's just like you listen to the lyrics and it's Rivers Cuomo obviously trying to be smart, and there's like one in this one where it's just like uh oh, Grapes of
Grabs
Wrath,
of Wrath.
where
It's
it's
like,
about how
oh god.
he he just tunes out the world and he listens to his audio books, and it's like he drops all of the names
Yeah.
of the smart books, and it's just like this is all he cares about. And then a few songs later he has screens where it's just like, oh, all of these people tuning out their on their phones with screens and playing solitaire and stuff are bad because I just want my friends and family back. Well,
Hmm.
you're out there taking a walk and listening to, whatever. You're not even reading books. You're listening to
Yeah.
them.
I mean,
So it's,
yeah.
I don't know.
Absolutely. I mean, I would be
It
astonished if Grapes of Wrath doesn't end up in an Audible advert at some point, because it's just, it is,
yeah.
it very much felt like, okay, Rivers, this is clearly a rejected jingle for an Audible advert. What is this doing on the record?
Hmm.
Yeah. So I,
Especially considering like, the rest of it is
hmm,
he kind of doesn't like how like it's not like okay computer on how
hmm,
inhuman we're becoming, but it's just like he has clearly been inside for a long time, and he's dealing with the mixed emotions
hmm,
of like he can't talk to his family because they're on screens, but he also wants to tune out the entire world playing his piano because the world sucks so much. And I don't know, he doesn't stop to consider that maybe other people are dealing with it
yeah,
stuff too.
absolutely.
I don't know, it's
Hmm,
there's that part of Rivers Cuomo that rubs me the wrong
hmm,
way, where
yeah,
he obviously went to Harvard, and uh,
hmm, yeah,
he's a very intelligent person, and he kind of likes to flex the intellectual side a little bit. And it's not that I don't blame him, but it's just like he doesn't stop to consider
no, he,
other people might have emotions sometimes, or other people might have
hmm,
their own ways of dealing with it that is not the way he deals with it. And
hmm,
that's a lot of it, but
yeah.
I do want to say I do like this album as a whole. I do like the sound. I do like the 70s,
Hmm.
kind of symphonic sound. It's not the disco symphonic, which would come later,
Oh boy,
but
I
it's kind
can
of
imagine
the
we.
lush earlier
Yeah,
70s.
it's got that.
But
Yeah, because actually the album, the other thing I would probably compare this to sonically is, have you've heard of Scott Walker, haven't you? The Canadian musician. It does
mhm,
remind me in places of the later, more experimental sort of Walker Brothers stuff. It's got that sort of, you know, it's very nice on the surface, but when you start to go into the lyrics, it's like, oh boy, this is surprisingly dark. And it's like,
mhm,
I don't think this is the thing. As we had this conversation, I think when we spoke about Blue, Weezer are never going to be able to do darkness to the same way that I don't know. You could even compare, let's say, because obviously Pinkerton is regarded as the beginning of what we now call sort of emotional hardcore, or more simply emo. But the thing is,
mhm,
as we said on our last episode, the last time we spoke about Weezer, it's a very middle class, angst. It's a very,
yeah.
and
It's
obviously,
very suburban.
it's very and Weezer have always been a very suburban band, and I find it interesting because this is like the record on, obviously given that a lot of the themes on this album are, social isolation, being unable to go outside, the idea that, particularly on the track Play My Piano, where just the days are blurring into one, everything's, done via, Zoom. You haven't washed your hair
Hmm.
weeks because you don't, because there's no point of going outside because you haven't been outside. It may be an accidental pandemic album, but it sort of does feel like he
Yeah.
has hit this right on the, because we are obviously in the UK here, we are still in a sort of second, our third or fourth lockdown. I lost count. That's the sort of how bad it's been. We're basically in the third lockdown, and it's like nobody knows quite when it's going to end, and everyone's sort of poking at the thing, going, well, why aren't we going back to work? You know, and
Yeah.
it,
It's
and I felt that perhaps because obviously I've been spending the last, well, let's think now, the last 6 or 7 months, you know, with brief breaks for, actually, because I started a new job in last August, but after obviously, you know, having been essentially social isolated for 7 or 8 months, I can kind of feel this album is very much, perhaps the only other record I would probably think of as a quintessential lockdown album is the new Nine Inch Nails albums, Ghosts 5 together and Ghosts 6, which Locust, which very much, although they came out at the beginning of the pandemic, has sort of felt like a an almost prophetic thing, as Trent Reznor does tend to be, of the ideas of lockdown.
Mm-hmm. And what I would say about this as a whole is it fits together
Mm.
as a full album. It has that feeling like you are walking through life in the pandemic, and
Mm.
it's just constantly, just strolling along trying to exist. And it has that beat of just you're still going forward, and still doing whatever, and it's just you're hitting random pockets of
Mm.
feelings here and there, and then it ends at La Brea Tar Pits, which it's like I'm sinking and I don't know if it's going when it's going to end. And I
Mm.
think it's a good ending that it's like that it's not necessarily going to end, but it's just like it's not ended yet and I don't know when it's going to end. And
Yeah.
I think that's a good ending point for
Mm.
that. This.
Mm. So, do you mind if we just go through this? I'm just going to go this briefly, a few songs or so. This is my sort of thoughts on it. You're welcome
Yeah.
to obviously add your thoughts. So, yeah, all my favourite songs. I think this is always going to be the single off this album. It sort of very much captures the sort of the sense of what the sort of the album is,
Mm-hmm.
and it has got that really nice all my favorite songs make me, and it's like it works very well. It feels like a very good sort of like summary of this album is some new favorites, perhaps some new favorite Weezer songs, and perhaps some Weezer songs that you'll go, yeah, these are alright. But it feels like on all our favorite songs, it's a statement of intent. It's like this comes out 2 weeks. Let me see, when did it come out? The single come out. The single came out on the November the 17th, and it was like on November 21st. So this comes out 6 days before the record, and it's like, okay, Weezer have gone this, and it's like, okay, this is an exciting new, and I feel like the only other track I think could possibly have been released as a single is probably Playing My Piano. I think it's the only other track that sort of captures what he's trying to do on this record as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a good song to release by itself
Mm.
because it is about something singular. It's like
Mm.
all my favorite songs are sad, and like I like all the people who hate me, and it's that
Mm.
feeling, and it's all wrapped up into this one little song, and you can release that as a single,
Mm.
but it also connects to this bigger
Yeah.
idea of this album.
Yeah. So I like that. This track is definitely something I'm going to listen to again. It's like it's
Okay.
it's good example of sort of Alu Gooby. My main comments on it is, boy, that sort of the violins and the sort of thing, that sounds very, as you said earlier, Eleanor Rigby. It's like, yeah,
Hmm.
Rivers, you're trying to do a Beatles album. This is and it works. It's a nice sort of his voice. The thing I think about this is his voice suits this sort of setting, because you could because bands have done albums where it'll be strings. For example, one of my favorite heavy metal bands, Blind Guardian, who are this German power metal band, did an entirely symphonic album, and it's like, yeah, your voice fits this sort of because he's got this very big heavy metal sounding voice. It fits a lot of the album where it's this sort of minor key symphonic stuff, and it's like, great. But you can imagine, like, for example, I don't think the Foo Fighters are ever going to do an album like this, because Dave Grohl's voice is not the sort of voice that suits symphonic rock.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
He is hard rock all the way,
Mm.
even when he does like the soft
Yeah.
ones. Like if in his soft songs
Mm.
you hear the electric guitar,
Yeah.
and it's just like you like In Your Honor Volume 2,
Hmm.
or Disc 2, or whatever you want to call it. It even his soft songs, it is very much you
Mm.
hear the rock song, you understand that this is the Foo Fighters and it's not, ELO or
Yeah,
something.
and that's the other influence I would say is so I'll just go back to my point. So I think there's a lot of a Beatles influence on it, particularly on the first couple of tracks where it's like very McCartney plus orchestra sounding stuff. Because I think um, the Beach Boys influence is fairly, evident on it. You have got because the way this album is put together, it has these sort of nice little segues. So obviously when this comes out on vinyl, because I don't think at the moment obviously at the moment with a lot of records they are coming out digitally. Well, and then obviously you're getting a physical format when shops are a thing again. So I could imagine this sounding
Hmm.
really nice on vinyl, but yeah, it's sort of like, and then we get to, and I didn't really like Grapes of Wrath. I think Grapes of Wrath is like, it's a little bit corny. it's,
It's a little bit corny, and like
mm,
3 and 4, Grapes of Wrath and Numbers,
mm,
are what I call okay boomer songs,
yeah,
because they definitely he definitely is pulling a
mm,
snob card, and he's like, I'm listening to all this great stuff, and
mm,
it will come in later in screens.
mm.
Um, but he is definitely have this like okay boomer sense
No, I
of like,
agree. It's sort
I
of,
just want to go out on the street and listen to like the good stuff, like 1984, Grapes of Wrath, Moby Dick, like great literature.
yeah, and it's
And I
like,
want to get away from
it
people.
did feel very much like, Rivers, these are like secondary school reading. These are like stuff I read at like 30, 15,
Oh
13,
yeah.
14, 15, 16. You know, particularly Grapes of Wrath, because it's like, okay,
Hmm.
Steinbeck, pretty much, baby's first American literature. It's like, okay, fair enough. It very much does feel like, I think honestly, if there was one track I'd cut from this, it probably would be Grapes of Wrath. Just it the concept it's trying to do, I think fits better on other tracks, but
Hmm.
Numbers I felt was like a very Pinkerton vibe. The strings are very good on it, and it is
Yeah.
the bit at the end, sort of, it goes into the sort of, his almost the a cappella bit, where and it almost reminded me of, this is going to sound like a really weird comparison to Philip Glass's Einstein on the Beach, which has got this this section where it goes 1 2 1, and it's sort of like, okay, Rivers, that's fine. Um, Play My Piano is the best track on this album. I'm gonna stick to that.
Okay. All right. I will disagree with you on that.
Okay,
Just if I wanted to add anything about Numbers,
okay.
it's like it feels like a Facebook inspirational post, like
Oh god, yeah.
how numbers are always attacking you, and then don't let them define you. And if you want, you can talk to me. And like the song kind of switches themes to like, rather instead of how numbers come to get you, it's like you can talk to me, and it's just like, okay, this is a really weird way of
Yeah.
getting people to interact with you on social media.
Hmm.
I mean, I know it's not social
Yeah.
media, but that's how it feels like. So if you don't want these negative things, you can come talk to me, and
No.
it's like it feels like the person, if you DM and try to talk to them, it's like they'll give you one word responses.
Yeah. Oh,
that's
definitely.
that's that is my problem with
Hmm.
numbers.
Yeah.
But sorry, playing my piano.
Yeah, I think this is the best track. As I said, best track on the album. You could hear the ELO sort of influences, particularly in the instrumentation. ELO are Electric Light Orchestra, a British sort of band who basically what they tried to do in the early 1970s is to add basically symphonic elements in the form of strings, and actually strings instruments and brass to a rock sort of thing. And you'll probably remember, probably the most famous track by them is Mr. Blue Sky, which was the track for those who
Hmm.
are who haven't who aren't as rock obsessed as me and Joe, is the track at the beginning of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. But yeah, so they're a very
Hmm.
very good British rock band. I would definitely recommend, if you haven't listened to ELO, go and listen to ELO. But it's also got like a really, particularly towards the end, it's got this sort of musical theatre thing going on, and it's like, it's sort of almost like when he goes do 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 do, it's like that's almost like a bit of musical theatre. And yeah, so I think
Okay.
that's the best track on the album. And it's surprising what it packs into like 2.5 minutes.
Hmm.
But you're gonna differ on
I
that.
I liked it.
Yeah.
I like there's some of them that kind of some tracks like when you're in an album
Mm,
like this where everything sounds similar and
mm,
everything like they start to meld together and you start tuning out. I think playing my piano is when I start tuning out the lyrics or I
mm,
start in some weird way because I did not hear that. I mean, I'm used to how this album sounds. I'm used to what it's generally about, and I get what it's
mm.
about. It's about how he can like close himself off and play his piano, and he doesn't care if
Kim Jong
what
Un.
happens. That's yeah, Kim Jong Un comes and destroys us all. It doesn't matter. He's not going to hear it. But I mean, that was good. I mean,
Yeah.
I like the song.
Mm,
Uh, it's just okay. I kind of got it and then moved on. I didn't have the attachment. There is one song I do have feel a more attachment to, but we'll get to that later.
yeah. Then we have Mirror Image, which is just a nice like minute code. It's basically like an extra part of playing my piano, which is great. Um,
Hmm.
and then we get to Screens, and Screens. First off, it has like a Blackpink reference to the Korean girl band Blackpink, and it was like, Rivers, Rivers, no,
Yeah.
not with the Orientalism, please, please,
Yeah, and also do not mess with K-pop
please
stands.
don't. You know they will eat you alive, Rivers.
Yeah, it is a very. I am an older person with kids, and I do not
Yeah.
understand this new world that's in front of me, and
Mm.
I want things the way I want it, and I want my family to not look at screens, and I don't want them to play solitaire. There, I am the only one who has like family stuff and stuff where I go into the street and listen to my audio books on high school literature.
Yeah, and it was like,
But
Livers, nobody has owned a PC that plays solitaire in like I don't remember what was. I can remember solitaire on Windows XP, and I swear it's never been actually as a default thing on the PC since.
mhm.
It's like this is a bit of an
I mean,
old
we play it on our cell phones now.
Yeah.
I
Oh.
mean, I have a
Hmm.
program on solitaire, but I am closer in age to Reverse Cuomo than I am to other,
Hmm.
what would be the cool kids.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't have much to say except, it's like, especially with this track here, Grapes of Wrath probably is the one that needed to be
Hmm.
cut because
Yeah.
it comes off as hypocritical and it's just like, uh, okay, Rivers, okay, old man.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Bird with a Broken Wing. This one is my favorite because it
That's.
has that. It has going back to the Wes
Hmm.
Anderson thing. It feels like it is the track Wes Anderson would play when something extremely emotional has happened. So they're like cutting through their hipster, days that's been going on, and something actual, real, emotional is happening, and that feels like what Bird with a Broken Wing
Hmm.
is, and it has a very uh, it's metaphorical, but you don't know what it's metaphorical for. So you can put whatever you like from your experience into it, but it stands alone as its own song, and it is really good. I think like um, the Lady Gaga people have said the Lady Gaga song about you know in being in the rain
Hmm.
is what they're going to play when they're referencing 2020, but I think like
This comes
if you have
close.
a
Yeah.
TV series that takes place in 2020 and you had some sort of emotional revelation or something and it's the end of the episode and you're moving on, I think Bird with a Broken Wing is
Yeah.
what you play
Yeah.
because it has that I everything's broken but I am still moving along and I'm still fine,
Hmm.
and that is that quality that and it makes it and it doesn't you don't have to slot it for 2020. You don't have to slot it for anything. It's just a song about, a bird with a broken wing that is still what it, it doesn't do what it used to do, but it's doing fine with what it's doing.
Yeah.
So you can plug that into whatever you would like.
Hmm.
And it really works. And I really love the music on
Yeah.
it swells at the right times. And it's a really powerful song,
Yeah.
even if it's, you listen to it more and it's like, oh, it's about a bird.
Yeah. I I would probably say after playing my piano, it's my favorite track on the album. And it's sort of interesting. This is the longest track on the album. Like this album is
Hmm.
barely is about um is 30 seconds over half an hour, and it's like
Yeah, I'm looking at our timeline right now, and we have talked longer than this album
yeah,
is.
that's the thing, and I like it, and it's very much no track on this, with the possible exception of Screens, which I think is a little, despite the fact that Screens is 2 minutes long, you know,
Hmm.
it feels like it is too long. There's no, the thing is, it sort of, basically what it does is it introduces a concept. It goes, here is the concept of this song. Here is some nice, instrumentation. Done. On to the next one, and it's sort of very
Yeah.
quite pleasant. I mean, Weezer have never been an album, a band to produce particularly long records, but it's sort of
No,
nice.
it was one of the big complaints at the end of the '90s. Entertainment Weekly literally had. Now, could you just wait a year?
Yeah.
Album where you could have waited a year and released more tracks, and
Hmm.
it's like Weezer's. I think it was Green at that
Yeah.
point. I
was one of,
can't remember,
might well have been
but
Green.
whatever one was 30 minutes, and it was exactly what you would
Yeah.
expect a Weezer album to
Green,
sound
Green,
like.
Green. I think Green might be still the shortest. Green is 28 minutes long,
Oh yeah, 28 minutes. Yeah,
despite packing
which is
10
especially why they
tracks
were
in.
hard on it.
Despite packing 28, I mean it's longer in in most regions because they add extra songs, but it's still even
Yeah.
with extra tracks, this is barely, yeah. So and it's sort of nice because everything, because they all it fits together, as I said, with this skewing very much. It's sort of you could do this. I don't know. I question whether Weezer will ever play this live as is on record. I could imagine Cuomo playing a couple of tracks, stripped down for like a piano and a quartet, which you could do at a particular point in the evening. But it feels very much like it could be done as like a single run through of every track on this, because there's nothing that sort of particularly feels technically complicated if we go to one track to the other. So yeah, Dead Roses actually has a guitar on it. um,
And I do not remember this song at all. I have heard it 4 or 5 times, and I tried to listen to it in a row, and I can't remember how it goes. I kind of know what it's about, and it's the most forgettable song on the album I found.
yeah, I've put there's a bit of a Beatles vibe. It's quite a dark. It's probably the darkest track on the album, but
Yeah.
it's like I don't remember very much of it either. Yeah,
Hmm.
again, you could probably I question whether you would cut anything from this, but it's like some of the tracks sort of do get a little bit lost in the sort of, as we've discussed with Weezer generally. They do, there are the really good standout tracks, and then there is like the rest of it, and frankly you could go through 2 or 3 of these tracks and go, oh, that was 2 or 3 tracks.
Hmm.
Yeah, so and then we get to Everything Happens for a Reason, which is the shortest track on the album, and the one that annoys me the most. I have written here simply no exclamation mark, not the Oriental riff exclamation mark. Rivers is a weeb. It does. It just
Ah.
has this very Chinesey, the sort of very stereotypically, Asian sounding piano riff, and it's like,
Hmm.
uh...
It's like, what is it doing here?
please,
That is my only thing, is what is it doing here?
yeah.
It's not real. It doesn't really transition to the next song. I don't know if he felt he needed it
Yeah.
because we had Dead Roast, which was a dark song,
Yeah.
and it needed something to transition to Here Comes the Rain.
Yeah.
But it's there. I listened to it for 23 seconds, and then we go to Here Comes the Rain.
Yeah. Yeah, which basically feels like, Dead Roses Part 2, because I swear it uses exactly the same, you know, bits. I swear that it uses like a very similar or a variation on the same sort of strings part. Um, I liked it. It's upbeat. I'm not quite sure about Rivers going splish splash at the end, but it's like, okay, Rivers.
Yeah, and looking like the Wharton Salt Girl.
It's like, yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, you probably don't, Rivers. You probably
You
don't.
probably
But
don't.
it's I don't know. It's a weird song because, we've said, we can't imagine Rivers doing this,
No.
like doing this singing in the rain dance.
Hmm.
He is not that person, which is it's takes me out of the song, and it's like I get what it's saying, it's fine, but it's just like I'm imagining Rivers Cuomo doing this, and it's not
It's not a
connecting.
it's not a good mental image. It's just no, Rivers, no, you're not Gene Kelly. Please stop. Um, La Brea Tar Pits. I was sort of initially because I listened to this a few times and it's sort of like this is what we're finishing with because like
Hmm.
I think initially I thought Here Comes the Rain would be a perfect because it's sort of like at the end of the record you go "Diddle-diddle," okay, now everything might be all right. And it's like, oh no, we're sinking into the mud of La
Yeah,
Brea Tar Pits.
it's if it was made 6 months later, they might have switched the
Yeah,
track list, or if
yeah,
they released it. If when people have vaccines and stuff,
yeah.
but right now, this you can tell this was made smack dab right in the
Mm,
middle, like right when we had a surge or something like that.
absolutely,
That's
yeah.
what the end of and that's why it feels right to me. But where right now it's not over, people are just pretending it's over.
Mm.
Like Iowa is lifting all of their restrictions and all of this, and
Oh dear.
they're going to have a mad surge in
Yeah.
3 weeks. But it's just like, oh yeah, all the people who can die from this have gotten vaccinated, so we're moving on to pretending nothing's wrong.
Yeah, and it's starting to get that way in the UK, and it's sort of like, yeah, I can agree. I was initially quite down on this, and it's like, and it does sort of, it does seem to reply Alu Gooby, again, quite
Hmm.
because I will say this, once it thematically works quite well, but listening to this as sort of individual tracks, you go, okay, there's more than a little bit of sort of, the same musical riffs, the same musical themes coming out. And, I don't know whether that's a reflection on River Cuomo's sort of, writing style. I don't know if that's,
Hmm.
moved to a symphonic, to a string thing where he is, the principal arranger. It does become a little bit samey, but it's, I feel it. I
Yeah.
feel it works to the album's advantage, actually, frankly, because
Hmm.
because in a lot of places it does feel very much like it it works almost a song cycle, to use a really old terminology,
Yeah.
better than
And it especially works as a 30-minute album
Mm,
because you can just listen to it and everything
mm,
flows, everything goes.
mm,
And like I feel like if you had like just a Weezer album, there would be some songs you skipped, and then like
mm,
after like 10 minutes of listening, oh, I'm out of album. So this
yeah.
is something you can just
Mm.
pop on.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
that's the thing. The brevity of it and the shortness of the majority of these songs make it so if you actually almost have to make an active effort to skip this, and it's like well,
yeah,
this song is over in a minute and a half. What's the point? I don't mean to be like in this age of streaming where the album is very much this rather strange and defunct old beast, but having this sort of
yeah,
short package of songs where everything's you know has brevity to it, and you're gonna end up expending more effort switching to the next track rather than listening to it as a whole. Yeah, so it's sort of really interesting to sort of compare this to sort of other pandemic albums, because this is the other albums that have come out in the pandemic have not really been quote unquote pandemic albums, with the possible exception
no,
of the Nine Inch Nails record. I mean, if we really compare this to the two albums Taylor Swift has put out, the album that Paul McCartney entirely recorded in lockdown, which is just called McCartney
hmm,
3,
yeah,
absolutely there is a sparseness. I mean, I have listened. This is going to really surprise you, Joe. I have listened to a lot of the two Taylor Swift albums. They're good records. That
okay,
I don't know whether it's suddenly she suddenly realised, oh, if I go back to country, but all get these people who have been doing country like Justin Vernon of Bon Iver and one of the gentlemen from the National, and make this
hmm,
nice sparse record where basically Taylor Swift realized not everything needs to be about her. you know
and pretend Reputation never
yeah, we,
happened,
we,
which
we,
is
we all
an
pretend.
incredibly
Yeah,
weird thing that people just forgot it. It's like
yeah, We're destined.
It's like you make one bad tweet and it will follow you the rest of your
Yeah.
life. But Taylor Swift makes an entire album where it's like old Taylor's dead,
Oh god.
and
I mean, she
and then
yeah.
2 albums later, nobody, like, the general public forgot that happened.
Yeah.
And wait, what? It's
Yeah.
a very weird trick to pull. I mean,
I feel
it's a
eventually.
credit to her star power.
Yeah. We'll eventually, inevitably
me-
return to talking about reputation. I have a horrible feeling like one day somebody's going to pay us to talk about reputation. If you do want us to talk about reputation, obviously we will talk about our PayPal, because this is our Patreon, because this obviously is a Patreon exclusive at the end of the episode.
Yep. Just suggest it. Put any suggestions you got in the comments and all that. I think we've talked enough on this. I mean, it's a very good album. It's a very singular album, and it is a very COVID-19 album.
Yeah.
So
I think
yeah, check it out.
Yep. I would say this is honestly this is certainly the best album Weezer have done since the White Album. It might be the best album it's certainly the best album they've done in the last 5 years. It's
I will take your word on it.
I went and listened to everything. I genuinely forgot how bad Pacific Daydream was. It's appalling. It's not good. But no,
Okay.
The other thing I will say very, very quickly is I really do like the art, the cover art, which is done by, like, I think it's some Norwegian or Swedish bloke who, does these really intricate. It reminds me of something, and I can't think what it is now.
It also has that 70s art feel, like 70s newspaper cartoon
yeah,
art.
absolutely, which might be what it reminds me of. So yeah, that I would frankly describe it as, it's a personal and it points downbeat Weezer record. There's a little bit of thematic ground. This is a solid 8 out of 10 record. Like, it's...
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
There's nothing on it that really irritates me. It's a well put together piece of music, album. It's Weezer playing to their strengths. Weezer are best when they are doing things that are, even if this is essentially symphonic Weezer album, this is, a nice package of songs in which Rivers Cuomo once again goes, here is what I'm thinking about.
Yeah. And one last note, it has nothing to do with OK Computer. There's no commentary on it or anything else. It is just a play on words. Yeah, that is it.
Much in the same way as TV on the radios, OK Calculator is nothing to do with OK Computer. It's
Yep.
Yeah. Do you know what? Surprisingly enough, OK Computer is an extremely influential album. People do like to riff off it.
Yeah. It's just something they will say, they will reference even if they don't really even know what it is. So it's one of those musical references. Like, I don't know how many people actually listen to those about the rock. We salute you. I mean, I listen to it because, of course, I'm an 80s and 90s kid and AC/DC all day, every day.
Yep.
But there are people who can reference that but not know what it is. So that's kind of how the OK Human fits into this.
Yeah.
I don't know how much Rivers Cuomo listens to Radiohead. It feels like something he would listen to, not reference so much.
I think Weezer did a cover of Paranoid Android at some point. I swear. I'm pretty sure they have at some point, and people are going, why have Weezer done this? And the answer is 6 years later, well, they called an album OK Human.
So yeah, it's definitely something he's aware of, but it's probably something he shouldn't use as an influence.
Don't think we're ready.
Anyway,
I
think that's all.
So yeah, this is the first of our hopefully many Patreon episodes. We won't sort of go what the next Patreon episode is about because we don't know yet. We might talk, as Joe would agree, we might talk about the new Foo Fighters album next because that's coming out not too distantly. I try to remember when it's coming out now. But
time has lost all meaning for me.
Yeah, it's like I know they got a new album, Medicine at Midnight, which is coming out. It's out as of 2 days ago, apparently.
Oh, is it?
Apparently, yeah. So that we might talk about that at some point, but we're going to give it a break because next week is Valentine's
Yeah.
Day, and whilst I have nothing better to do, other people do.
Hmm.
So yeah,
My one day off next week is Valentine's Day, so it's just like
yeah,
my wife might be a little upset at me if I did a recording.
yeah. So yeah, we will see you on another episode of Tom and Joe. Next time we're on regular
Mhm.
Tom and Joe, not Patreon Tom and Joe. We'll be talking about Norwegian black metal because something I don't think you've ever listened to, is it, Joe?
Nothing like besides 5 second clips like here is what this sounds like. And
so,
then
so this is going to be a
okay,
bit.
that's it.
This is going to be a bit of a revelation, I think. So
Okay.
yes, let us talk about Patreon very briefly to be really boring. So if you're listening to this, you are on our Patreon. Hello. But if you're watching this on YouTube in May, hello, are we out of the pandemic yet? Um, so what we do basically is we have a Patreon, which is, and I will get it up because the last time we mentioned this, it took me ages to try and find it. It is, as I said, it is www.patreon.com/the Tom and Joe Show, all one word. Tom is spelt with a H, like Tom from Tom York from Radiohead. So yeah, that's
Hmm.
us. It will also be in the link of the description. If you do want us to do a special episode, if you are already a Patreon, then by all means just drop us a message or contact us on our Twitter, which is I'll get this more organised in future, which is at not so final prod. So you can then sort of go, would we like to talk about, for example, Taylor Swift's reputation? The answer is possibly yes, but we'll have to wait and see.
All right.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you on the next episode of the Tom and Joe Show. We hope you've enjoyed this, our first of many Patreon episodes. See you later, and goodbye from me.
Okay. Bye-bye.